Congratulatory messages have been pouring in from around the world for the two journalists, Walone and Kyaw Soe-oo, after their release. UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt called their release a rare glimmer of hope. Mr. Hunt had personally campaigned for the journalists to be freed when he met Myanmar State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi last year.
And Amal Clooney called Reuters' commitment to getting their reporters released inspiring and expressed hope that the case will lead to a renewed commitment to press freedom in Myanmar. Mrs. Clooney was a member of the legal team who worked on the journalist case last month, and she said that it had been an honour to represent them. Human rights groups also expressed their relief for the two men. Human Rights Watch said they should have, quote, never been arrested in the first place, and their release was long overdue. And a spokesperson for UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said that he was relieved to learn of the news. Amnesty International said the case was a travesty of justice, adding that laws such as the Official Secrets Act remain in place in Myanmar, and warned that journalists and activists remain under a permanent threat of detention and arrest.
Now, for more on this, we're joined in studio by Dr. Moe Thuzar, coordinator of the Myanmar Studies Programmes at the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute. Thanks so much for coming in. Good to see you as always. Firstly, this news, did it come out of the blue? Did it come as a surprise to you that they were going to be released?
I would have to say, personally, yes, it did come as a surprise because, as you both know, for those of us who are following developments in Myanmar, there are amnesties that take place from time to time, but they are usually clustered around certain key dates in the calendar, like the Myanmar New Year, so to speak, or around Independence Day, or say after a new administration takes over. So this development, very welcome. It is a cause célèbre that has now become a cause for celebration. Of course, it is, I think, a surprise, the most pleasant surprise, of course, for the families of Walone and Kyaw Soe-oo.
Moe, it's no understatement that this case drew massive international criticism for Myanmar. Do you think that that played a big role in securing their release?
My answer to that, Dawn, would be yes and no. Definitely because of the very prominent, high-profile international coverage and attention that this case received, kept it on the agenda, in the limelight, and of course it also became a talking point for discussion for many visiting dignitaries. But at the same time, I think the nature of how the presidential pardon was decreed also shows us that Myanmar really walks to its own internal beat, in the sense that, well, it's not an isolated cocoon anymore. It's very much aware of its both its electoral and performance legitimacy. But at the same time, I think there is also this tendency, this momentum to take decisions in a way that reflects that they are taking the decisions on their own beat.
But what do you make of what the president said then, that this release was in the long-term interests of the country?
Well, I think that it reflects the desire, the aspiration of not just President Win Myint, but also of the ruling party, that they are aware, they are cognizant that this is something of an important step in many important steps to be taken in the country's transformation.
So you're saying they sort of walk to the beat of their own drum, if you like, sort of do things in their own time that may not be as quick as perhaps international watchers may like. But do we see this then as a move certainly in the right direction when it comes to press freedoms and democracy?
It's, as I mentioned, yeah, it's an important step in the many steps to be taken towards greater freedom of expression and so on. Essentially, the media situation, the situation of media freedom and voice and expression in Myanmar today, I would just basically say that it is still in a state where both the authorities and the media are still trying to find that equilibrium, and so they will get there. But of course, it's a confluence of factors, and I think no leader of a country would like to be analyzed or assessed as listening to others' advice. But of course, they will, I think, take that into consideration when they march to their own beat.
But the arrest of these two men, it marked a turning point for how many people perceived Aung San Suu Kyi herself, previously seen as an icon for democracy and freedom. Do you think that this case has done her a lot of harm at all?
In terms of perceptions, Dawn, that raises an interesting point, because the perceptions, the commentaries, the criticisms internationally were directly proportionate to the kind of strong support that Daw Soo's core support base in the country showed. So in terms of perceptions of Daw Soo in the country, there is still a very strong support base, and I think we need to look at these two almost mirror type of situations to look at how perceptions overall can feed into, say, behaviors, especially in the run-up to the elections which will take place next year.
And so how does this release of these two journalists being perceived then internally within Myanmar?
I think the journalistic community, the media community, of course, are all expressing relief. I think the Foreign Correspondents Club in Myanmar also issued a statement to that extent. And many of the media community have I think, welcomed and added their note of relief and support and thanks and congratulations and all of that. But at the same time, there have been 70 years of entrenched narratives that are difficult to shake off with all the best of intentions. And so I think all of us Myanmar watchers also probably need to look at how these entrenched narratives and attitudes might also create backlashes in their own in terms of the tropes that have been thrown out after the arrest of Wallon and Joshua U. So it's still finding equilibrium.
Mm. Mo, on the point of Aung San Suu Kyi, State Councillor's reputation as it stands now, you mentioned this support that she has. What do you account that support that people in Myanmar still give her?
Well, the democracy movement overall, of course, found its moment of, I guess, triumph, if you will, its moment of success over years of campaigning almost in the dark for the democracy movement to finally see the light of day in a country like Myanmar that has been under authoritarian rule. So the support base for Daw Soo and for the democracy movement and the pushback against what has been years of authoritarian military rule, I think, has left their mark on the country. And so, therefore, the kind of sometimes almost visible reactions that you see are also part of this very complex picture of a whole.
Mo, thank you very much for sharing your insights there. Always a pleasure to see you here in the studio.
Always a pleasure.
We've been speaking to Dr. Moe Thuzar, coordinator of the Myanmar Studies Programme at the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute.